My name is Mehul Revankar. I'm a product manager here at SaltStack for security. Today I'm going to talk about SaltStack for SecOps, a sneak peek that Alex announced the product yesterday. I'm going to go a bit deeper into the solution, what we are building, why we are building it, the problem that we have identified, and the solution we have come up with. And then I'll talk a little bit about the product vision, roadmap, and also go into a demo. So before I get into the solution, I want to talk about SaltStack vision Mark referenced at the keynote. Our vision is to intelligently secure and manage every IT environment in the world. And when you think about vision statements, by definition, they're supposed to be, or they should be, audacious and ambitious, right? I mean, they give us all. I mean, vision statements, by definition, give us a sense of purpose, a reason to exist. So they should be meaningful and actionable. Right? So if you, for example, if you had a vision to go to the moon and then you go out and build submarines and ships, it doesn't make sense. Right? So what we wanted to do as part of building out the solution is, well, if we build this solution, will it help us fulfill the vision that we have laid out? And we feel pretty confident as we go along, this solution will help us fulfill that vision. The other thing about being able to secure a modern IT infrastructure is that it's a massive undertaking, right? I mean, the cybersecurity IT spending for 2018, according to Gartner, was about $100 billion, right? So, but that should not mean that SaltStack should chase those $100 billion. There is a small niche that means valuable to us and to our customers. And if we build that, customer will buy it from us. So we didn't want to build something no one wants to buy, right? So that was very important to us. And so figuring that out was very important as well. How do we figure out what we need to build? I mean, what is it that our customers want us to build? So we talked to a lot of customers as part of the product development process on, what do you guys want us to do? And, we got feedback from all across the place. And some of our customers told us, well, can you help us with CIS and disassist? There were some customers who came back and told us, well, can you just help us patch these vulnerabilities so that we can go home on Fridays? And there are some customers who said, we have to comply with all these external standards, but then we have our own internal security policies and standards as well. So we want to pick and choose and create our own custom little policy for our compliance needs, right? And some customers said, we have so many tools in our security operations team. We just need one tool to rule them all. Can you just integrate with all these tools so that it just works, right? Can you help us auto-remediate? I mean, we have already told you we want to fix it. Why are you asking me again and again if you want to fix it? And so on and so forth. So that was really good feedback for us. And from a product manager's point of view, this is a good problem to have. I mean, you want real pain points to solve. You don't want to solve something no one wants you to solve. Right? So this was really good feedback. And the next step, what we did was we looked at, well, if these are legitimate problems, what are some of the existing tools doing there? I mean, why has this problem not been solved yet? So we looked at a lot of existing solutions, and so we found some vendors who do a really good job of assessing compliance issues, assessing secure configuration issues, assessing vulnerabilities, but they would not remediate. Right? So it's similar to what Alex said in the keynote. Hey, you know what? There is a fire going on, and then they would not do anything about it. So we thought that was suboptimal. Customers should be able to assess and remediate. And then we found there were some vendors who can assess and remediate, but they don't provide any content. So for example, they would say, well, we have a really good engine, and you just have to go to this random GitHub repo from a random person from a random country and just apply it across your infrastructure, and it should be just fine, right? I mean, that doesn't work, I hope you know better. And we have seen examples of that. We have seen, malicious users pushing Docker images to Docker Hub with backdoors in them, and then people going out and downloading those images, putting them in production, and getting completely owned. So that was not tenable from our perspective. So we didn't want to do that as well. And then we ran into some vendors who could assess, remediate, provide content, but they could not scale. So for example, they would do this, and then as soon as you get to like 10,000 assets, 20,000 assets, the solution would start to falter. Or it was more of it could just do that, nothing else. And then the last category was almost no one could assess, remediate, provide content, scale, and then react. Like if this happened, put it back into compliance, right, automatically, without actually having to run a schedule or do something on those lines. So between these two really good pieces of feedback, we distilled this into a really good problem statement, right? What is the problem we need to solve? And the problem we identified was, from a security perspective, the modern IT infrastructure is getting extremely complex to secure. 10 years, 15 years ago, all of your infrastructure was in one data center. All your VMs were there, or your physical assets were there, and that's all you had to manage. But now the infrastructure is extremely fragmented. It's extremely across. Like now you have containers, you have your VMs, you have your physical assets, you have your legacy assets, and so on and so forth. Right? And not just that, the attack surface as a result of it is also exponentially increasing. You just have no idea what's going on, what is in my infrastructure. Just getting in hold of your asset inventory is a challenge, right? So that, from a security perspective, that was one challenge. And the second challenge was the compliance mandates are a burden for a lot of IT security. A lot of security teams. They know how to fix it, but they just don't know if they did this, they would comply with that, or so on and so forth, right? In addition to external compliance standards, you have to also have, a lot of organizations have their internal security policies they have to comply with as well. So that was the second challenge. And the last and the most important from my perspective was that there was complete lack of authoritative content that you could use against your infrastructure. I talked about it earlier. Just go to download this content from this GitHub repo, and it's all good. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, because then you end up with three different implementations of the same check, and then you're deciding which one do I choose, which one is better, which one is faster, which one is more secure. We didn't like that. So we wanted to fix that problem as well. And the second problem was, it's very difficult to get, there's a lack of in-house expertise to figure out all this content, write this content, maintain that content. And even if you start to write that content, it's difficult. It has a cost associated with it, to maintain that content, keep it up to date so that it's not obsolete, and so on and so forth. And the solution to that problem is SaltStack for SecOps. Now, what does that do? So here's what it is. So it's a new SaltStack enterprise module that secures modern IT infrastructure across cloud, hybrid, and on-prem. It's built on SaltStack's unique event-driven technology. And one of the best things we have done, in my view, is we have now taken a policy-driven approach to security. You can define, here's my policy for these targets, and we'll make sure that these targets always comply to that policy. And you can configure this policy any way you want, right? And as long as you have configured the policy, we'll make sure that those assets or those target groups are always compliant, always secure. And the last thing we did is we didn't write a single line of code without actually interviewing a lot of customers. Some of you are here right in front of me providing us feedback on the solution before we even start creating the solution. So the solution itself is designed with lean UX and user-centered design principles. On the compliance side of things, when we do compliance, when we do the assessment and remediation, we'll also provide context around the content. So for example, if you, just because you have a password policy in place, you know what, you're also compliant with 853 IA-5. You're also compliant with CIS critical controls and so forth. So we wanted to provide some more context to the content as well, so that you can make sense of it. It's important, I need to do this so that if I do this, I can comply. And then obviously, most importantly, you can create your internal security policies based on the content that we provide to create your own policies. On the content side of things, we'll provide out-of-the-box best practice industry standard guides such as CIS, SaltStack, even vendor guides which will be available with the product. Okay, cool. And this content will be supported, developed, maintained by SaltStack. And that's very important, right? If a new version of CIS benchmark comes up, we'll update it. If there are bugs in our content, we'll fix it. Before we ship anything, it will be heavily tested and by SaltStack and the engineers at SaltStack. And most importantly, our solution will be certified by CIS. And I've seen a lot of vendors get by. So if as a vendor, if you claim that you can do CIS content or you can scan for CIS and you're not certified for CIS, that's not right. Because you have to be certified by CIS to make that claim. And I've seen a lot of vendors get by this requirement by having third parties or user contributed content to be on some website and then say, well, you can just pull that content from there and then go along with it. We don't want to do that. We want to take a more mature and a professional approach to this problem, and we want to get certified by CIS. It's a very labor-intensive process. It's a very complicated, it's a very complex process, but we don't mind putting, since we believe in our technology, we feel pretty confident we'll be certified by CIS because we own the content as well. And eventually, we'll also get to the point where we'll also allow customers to assess and remediate vulnerabilities. So now what I want to do is show how this solution maps back to our vision. So I talked about securing and managing every IT environment in the world. And this is how we plan to fulfill that vision. So one of the first things we want to do is manage all the assets that you have in an infrastructure under our management. And you can do that with Salt Minions. You can do that with our, you have an agent-based solution with Salt Minions. You have agentless solutions such as Salt SSH. You have APIs for all the cloud providers. For right today, even before announcing this solution, we already have support for over 24 or 25 cloud providers out there. So between this mix, so if you look at this problem of a very fragmented IT infrastructure, for a solution to be usable, you have to be able to play in all these different areas. You have to have agents, you have to have agentless technology, you have to have APIs and so on. So you cannot be an agent only or agentless only or agent, API only solution to become a really complete solution. So with the technology that we have already, we feel pretty confident, once to manage all the assets in your infrastructure. And the second thing is, once we manage all the assets within the infrastructure, we can secure them with secure configurations based on best practice guides from CIS and SaltStack. And if you don't care about CIS or SaltStack, you can write your own content. You can just pull that content into our product, and you can use that as well. Or you could go to some vendor best practice guide and write content for that as well. So once you manage the assets, once you secure them with secure configurations, and finally, we want to patch these assets so they're always up to date. So there are no vulnerabilities in this on your assets. So you have secured them with the best configurations that are available in the industry. You have patched it, and now you have brought them under management with SaltStack, and then with the combination of Salt reactors and Salt beacons, you achieve a state of always compliant, always secure, always managed. Right? So that's how we aim to fulfill the SaltStack vision with this product. Now what I want to do is walk through some of the product screenshots that we have and then go into the product demo. So this is so when you buy the subscription for this new module, this is what you'll see in SaltStack Enterprise. You'll see a new tab for SecOps, right? It will have three basic things. You'll see some summary of your compliance trend over the last 30 days, summary of your asset compliance or minion compliance, and then you'll see a list of policies that you've already created with this solution. You could create policies for your operating system, for Docker, for Kubernetes, all the major applications and operating systems that you can think about. And let's say you did not create any policy. So you'll see a create policy button here. And I referenced this earlier. We are taking a policy-driven approach to security. So when you create policy, we'll walk you through a wizard where you can configure the policy. And as part of it, you could give it a name. You could select a few target groups. And the target groups are only visible to you if you have read access. If you have read access to those target groups. In the next step, you will select benchmarks that you want to run against your target groups. Right? And like I said, we'll provide this content out of the box with the product. So you'll see examples like CIS, dysstigs for Linux, for Windows. And you'll also see something that is very unique to our solution. As part of the product development process, and I've worked in this industry for quite a bit, and what I've seen is that the number of settings or number of configuration issues that you can audit on a system stay relatively constant over a period of time. You have the same password files, you have the same config files, but the compliance standards they keep adding on to it. You might have to comply with 853 today, PCI tomorrow, HIPAA next day, or HIPAA or 853 version 6, and so on and so forth. So the approach we took is we'll write the state files once, and then we map that state file to provide context for a multiple compliance standards, right? So as a result of it, if you don't care about CIS or dysstigs, we'll also provide a complete library for all the operating systems that we support. So you can come in there and you can say, you know what, I don't care about CIS and dysstigs. I just want my own Red Hat policy. And then you can see, we'll provide a library which will have all the checks that are available for a Red Hat operating system. And then you can check things off that you want to be part of the policy and create your own policy, right? And so once you select the benchmarks, you go to the checks tab, and all the checks, so the benchmarks are linked, the checks are linked to the benchmarks. So all the benchmarks that you selected, based on that, the checks that are applicable to those benchmarks will be automatically selected as part of the policy. You can obviously configure them, you can enable and disable them as you want, but we will enable them by default. And when you select the check, we'll also provide a lot of contextual information about it. For example, what's then the display name, the action, the compliance standards it maps to, some basic information about it, the profile, the CIS profile, level 1, level 2, it maps to the rationale for doing it. And the rationale is more important for the CISO level or someone higher up, like why do we need to do this? And we'll also provide you with the state file we're going to run as part of this assessment for that check. And you can look at every check that is provided so that you have complete control over what's getting run in your environment, right? We didn't want to just provide you with something and not have the transparency around what's happening. And then finally, you would go in and you would configure variables. So since we write the content since we write this content, at the time of creation of this content, we don't know some of the variables. For example, your syslog servers, your time server IP addresses, and so on and so forth. So when we create these state files, we also have hooks in the state files to prompt for these variables as you develop the policy, and you can configure that as part of the policy from the UI. And then finally, you can either decide to schedule this, or you could do an ad hoc. You could do an ad hoc run. So now let's assume, for the sake of this demonstration, that you've already run a policy, and something like this will come back. Right? You'll see some items are not compliant. There are some items that are compliant. A count on how many minions are compliant, how many minions are not compliant, if there are errors, and so on. And we want to provide 2 levels of views to our users. So you can look at this data from a checks level view. So for this check, these number of minions are not compliant. Or you can take a minions level view. Well, this minion is the most or least compliant. Right? For example, you might want to, I want to find out the least compliant minion so that I can whack that today. Right? So you can prioritize it from that perspective. The other thing you can do is, so once you realize this is not compliant, you could decide at this point that, you know what, I want to remediate this. And you can remediate this any way you want. You can remediate one check, all minions, one check, one minion, all checks. So you can configure this any way you want. So we give you complete flexibility around how to fix this. And you could say, you know what, remediate selected. And when you do that, it's going to kick off a salt job and remediate those items, right? But there is also a situation where where you might say, you know what, I have a business reason for this. I need to file an exemption, and I know this is this is not compliant, but I need to file an exemption because it's required for a business case. We have a business reason for it, so we provide an exemptions workflow as well. And finally, all the exemptions that you file will show up on the exemptions tab so that you can review them. And I'll get to the report where you'll see how you're doing for that benchmark. And then we'll also provide a history tab of all the jobs that you have run. So now what I want to do is run the demo. I recorded the demo so that I don't have to depend on the conference Wi-Fi. So I'm going to run this, and I'll explain what it's doing. So a customer comes in, you create a policy, give it a name, and a few targets configured. You'll select the targets, go to benchmarks, and you can select a few benchmarks that you want. So the target groups could be a complete mix of targets. So you don't have to worry about, I just want to do a CIS. Sorry, I want to do CentOS, Oracle Linux, and so on. So you can select a mix of target groups, a bunch of benchmarks, and since you selected those benchmarks, all those checks were enabled by default. But you could say, you know what, I don't want to run all of them, I just want to run a few of them. So you can come here and you can say, give me these 7 or 8 checks, right? Notice on the right side, you'll see the information for the first check for this. And we provide the description, the action, the global description for it. We didn't want to, so the reason we add, so I talked about write once, map often. So there is a good chance some of the checks that we write are applicable to CIS. There are some checks that might be, the state file might be the same, but it's applicable to DSA-STIG. But we didn't want, so we wanted to provide some general information about the check so that we are not explicit about this is a CIS check or a DSA-STIG check. So this is the global information is separate from the CIS or DSA-STIG. We provide information about the operating system this check is applicable to, the compliance standards it's applicable to, and then finally we get down to the remediation part. Right? It has all sorts of checks in it, and finally you'll notice that we take care about not running these state files on not applicable systems. So just for example, by accidentally you shoved in an AIX target in your target group, right? And you ran a CentOS assessment. So you know what will happen is the state file will run and say it's not applicable OS. So you have complete visibility when you run this assessment that this state file was not run because the operating system was not applicable. So all of these checks we have already written for the product, but since we didn't select them, we'll go down and save the policy. So now let's go and see what happens. So notice, at this point, we haven't run an assessment, we haven't run a remediation, we don't know what the status is, right? So the status is unknown at this point. So we now go out and do and run assessment. And this is very important to note. So when we do the assessment, we are not making any changes to the system. So Salt has a mode which says test is equal to true mode, where it goes and does where it goes out and does an assessment only. So it's not making any changes on your system. So and I talked about user lean UX and user-centered design and so on. So you see the color of the button is green. Like you do remediate, it's red. So those are the finer, small things we have taken care about this product as part of the product development. All these little details matter over a period of time. So this is an assessment only run. You can run it as many times as you want. Nothing's going to change in your infrastructure. And since this is a demo, everything has to be now compliant. You cannot have compliant systems as part of the demo. So let's see what happens when we do some remediation action on this. So you have the same information, the meta information that we talked about earlier. So now let's go in and do some remediation. Right? So let's pick this guy, the CentOS, and fix. And for now, let's just fix one. Let's just fix one issue. Notice it switched to red. Remediate selected. It's going to go out, do its thing. Back to assessment. We did the remediation, but we haven't run the assessment again. So let's run an assessment again and see what comes back. Obviously, it has to be compliant. So it's compliant now. Cool. So you've tried this for a while. You realize, SaltStack is really good technology. Let me just go fix everything. So you can say, go remediate all. And that's exactly what it would do. So you remediate it all. Again, everything is not compliant now because you haven't run an assessment. Let's go and do an assessment again and see what happens. Everything is compliant. Everything looks good. Let's take a look at the report tab. All green. We can all go home. Not now, but well. So next, what I want to do is talk about the product roadmap and show you where we are going from here. Well, before that, we are expecting to launch this solution in Q1 of 2019. So, and we are looking for beta customers. So if this is something that interests you, come reach out to us, and we'll be happy to, set up a beta session later in the year. So here's our roadmap for the solution. So when we launch, we'll have the secure configurations and compliance for all the major Unix operating systems and Windows. Over time, we'll have support for applications and databases and even network devices like Cisco and Juniper. We also see this technology expanding to cloud services such as Amazon AWS, Azure. Like I said, we already have the technology today to talk to about 24 cloud providers. So we leverage the same technology for your entire infrastructure. Once we get through the, once we get through the first step of the solution, the next challenge for us is to actually do this for vulnerability assessment and remediation, again, for all the major operating systems. And we'll also, like I said, we plan to provide out-of-the-box content for the solution, and we plan to update it daily, right? So, and the content update process is separate from the release of SaltStack Enterprise. So all you have to do is, click an update button, and you'll get new content. Hopefully, every time you log in to SaltStack Enterprise. So, we didn't want the content to be tied to a specific release, because we have seen so many cases where customers are hesitant to move from one release to others, but we didn't want them to not have the advantage of all the content that we are creating as part of this solution. And that, so that we'll have a feed distribution channel where all this content will be pushed to every day, completely tested, supported, and backed by SaltStack. If there are bugs in it, you'll fix it and move on to the next level. We also plan to support user-defined content. So, maybe you realize, what, SaltStack's content is not good enough. I have my own GitHub repo. I want to bring that data in. And that will be supported as well. So you should be able to create your own GitHub repo and bring that data in as well. Eventually, we want to tie this solution to the Salt Reactor and Beacon system, so that if something is not compliant, we put it back into compliant state. If something is not up to date, run some update commands and put it back in an update state. Okay? And then one thing we have realized is, when we go in with an initial product, it's very difficult for us to displace some of the products, right? And there's going to be a lot of resistance. And if that's the case, we also import data from other VM vendors and other tools, and based on the data that comes in, create the state files and the remediation actions based on the data. So we'll not do the assessment for you, but we'll do the remediation for you as well, right? So we'll fix that problem as well. So the first set of vendors that come to our mind are the Qualys's, the Tenables, and the Rapid7s of the world. And that's all I have. So thanks. Any questions? Yeah. Configurations? Yeah. How would that work? So Salt has a technology. Salt has we have a technology called Salt Beacons, which is a monitoring solution. And Salt is built on an event-driven system. So so for example, in this case, let's take an example. Let's say your SSH policy is not in compliance. We'll fire off an event on the event bus. Hey, I just saw this, and we'll have a reactor system in place which will be part of our content, which will put it back into compliance. So you don't have to wait for the schedule to run to fix it 2 weeks later to fix it. And the same thing on the VM side, on a vulnerability side, systems go out of date. You could say, you know what, any kernel patches, just update them and reboot the servers. It's unlikely you'll do it right away, but if you want to do it, we allow you to do it. It will be, as long as you buy the module, it will be part of it.
It won't be open source, it will be part of the
enterprise module, yes. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question in regards to availability for customers who want to try out
So we are hoping to get the beta around December, January timeframe, right? So you already saw the functional demo. We want to get it to production grade ready. Takes a lot of work. There are some engineers in this room, and it took Herculean effort on our part to get it to the point where it is today. But we feel confident in the next few months we'll get to a point where the product is really stable and something customers can try out and give us some really good feedback. And like I said, we are looking for customers who want to try out the solution. So if this is something of interest to you, reach out to Mr. Schaffer. He's right here, and he'll be happy to help you out. Yeah.
I saw that you handle Docker and
Kubernetes.
Kubernetes. Are there any other plans for any other, like other types of containers or other types of?
So we don't want to be tied to one specific technology, right? I mean, if you want Rocket, we'll do Rocket as well. And at that point, it becomes a roadmap decision, right? So if customers have requested, we are moving away from Docker. Can you help us with Rocket? We'll either work with you on the professional services side of things, or we'll write the content ourselves based on the interest. And it would be part of the feed, part of the product. You log in one day and you'll just see it. Anything else? Okay, so that's all I have. Thank you for your time.